Hey, let's talk about how to design characters using theme. Well, if you're writing an RPG, then you're going to have to write a fair number of characters, and maybe you're looking it up. How do I write characters? And people that have written movies and books and linear games are saying things like, oh, well, let's take the structural approach, right? This is your story arc. Your characters have to fit into your story, or else there's no reason to have them in your story. So they have to do things like push the story along, or make the players feel something, or exposit, or whatever. They have roles in the story, but they also have other, tidbits to make them feel human. And, that's how you write it. Great. There is no RPG with a story like this. RPGs have stories like this. And there's lots of random crap happening everywhere. The main story is 10% of an RPG at most. The rest of the time it's side quests and exploration and battling and crafting and hanging out, whatever, right? So how do you make it so that you can get all of that stuff with your character? Because if your character is only part of the core story, then they spend most of the game not being anything. I've got a main character and they've got the swordy sword of magicness, and your first party member is the goblin thief, and they look real skeevy and untrustworthy. And you're like, okay, this goblin thief is definitely going to completely betray me. You reach the mid-boss, and it's like, oh, the goblin thief vanished. They're betraying me. Oh, no. And then they come back and they kill the mid-boss, but they die themselves. And you're like, oh, no, he never betrayed me. He's such a good goblin. I feel so bad for mistrusting you. Yeah, great. That's 10 hours away. What are you going to do for the other 9 hours and 45 minutes? Is the goblin just going to stop existing and never have anything to say? Well, depressingly, that actually happens quite a bit in RPGs. No, of course not. You're going to want to write the goblin into as many of these side quests and towns and adventures and battles as you can. So you do that. You force the goblin to say things during all of these encounters, all of these side quests. The goblin always has something snide to say, right? That's going to feel really forced, and I'm sure you've felt that before. Why is my talking cat talking here? It doesn't have anything to say about it. They just wanted to remind me that I've got a talking cat. Great. So it's really hard, right? How can you do this? How can you make it so the goblin always has something to say, but it never feels forced? If all of your encounters are on theme, if all of your missions are on theme, and the goblin is also on theme, it fits together really easily. Let's give you an example. Star Trek: The Next Generation. All the main characters are on theme. The theme of Star Trek: The Next Generation, I would argue it is what it means to be human, or perhaps what it means to be civilized. And all of the characters are written with that theme in mind. Let's take a look at a couple of the main ones here. Data. Data is a robot. He's like, Captain, what does it mean to be human? I have no emotions. And because his theme is, I want to be human, and the theme of Star Trek is, what does it mean to be human? There's frisson there. So let's say you're in a story when you got the natives of Globulon 5, they are all affected by a space virus that makes them trust absolutely everything everyone says. And Data can be like, let's hold up my magnifying glass of plot, and then we'll ask lots of questions. Like, Captain, what does it mean when they do this? Can you do that? Can this work? I will program myself to trust everything that everyone says for the next week, just to get a sense of what that would be like. You've now written Data into the story because Data is asking questions, Data is getting answers, Data is investigating, Data is reprogramming itself for the B plot. It's really, really easy to write Data into this because Data's point is that he wants to be human and he sees some humans doing some strange things. He wants to understand what it means to be human, and there's some humans doing strange things. That's easy. You can write that all day and all night. It doesn't even matter what the plot is. If the Klingons come over and they're saying something, they can be like, why do the Klingons say things like that? Same exact sorts of questions, same exact sorts of situations. You can just write it because the Klingons are human. Because when we say, what does it mean to be human, we're obviously using space aliens as humans, blah, 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 blah. But the point here is that Data is only one of the main characters. For example, we've got Riker. And Riker is what it means to be human from a playful side, right? He's the one that gets laid a lot and does all the music and has fun and plays around. And then you've got Picard. We did Riker. And Picard is what it means to take responsibility for being human. And he's like, got all the command requirements and all that sort of stuff. And again, because these things fit perfectly into the stories you're telling, they can fit into the stories you're telling easily. Like Riker can go down to this planet and they can be like, he can tell a little white lie and then it'll be believed utterly by the locals and they'll go, oh shit. Or he can hit on someone or they can hit on him and he can be like, well, is it really okay for me to have sex with this lady? Is she mentally compromised because she's trusting me so, implicitly? And then, Captain Picard can be like, I have responsibility to these people because I am responsibility. That's my theme. So do I have a responsibility to protect them? Do I have to fix them by making them distrust people in order to help them survive? When I give an order and they follow it too aggressively, that's bad. How do I fix that? How do I take responsibility for that? And again, it's very easy to write. And this is the secret of writing this kind of story. You don't have to come up with fantastic, interesting, intricate plots. You just have to have an on-theme nugget of an idea. And if your characters are also on theme, the story suddenly exists because we've just written it. We've just written a story where Riker goes down to the planet and accidentally tells a lie, a little white lie, and charms the hell out of someone. And that's how you learn that these people trust everyone implicitly. And now you've got the commander, Captain Picard has to be like, okay, well, how do I deal with this person that is attached to Riker? I will give them a very, very, stay back. And then suddenly everything's going haywire and Data's like, well, I'll program myself to trust everything everybody says. And your story is now underway. And it's tense and it's interesting. Your characters are involved. They're responsible for the things that are going on. They're active. They have goals. They have problems. And it was all just because your themes line up. Imagine how much harder it would have been to write this little mini episode if Data was the robot guy. Like, well, how do I get the robot guy to interact with these trusting people? Well, there are ways, but they're all pretty forced, right? It's all like, well, Data is all ones and zeros, and that's kind of trust and distrust. Really, really forced. Or how do I make the first lieutenant guy? How do I make him interact with these trusting people? Well, he doesn't really have characteristics that would interact with the nature of trust, so we've got to force it again. And the dour captain, how do we make the dour captain interact with them? Well, again, being captain and being dour don't really interact very easily with the nature of trust. So again, we've got to force it. But because we've defined them as on theme, it flows really, really easily. Now, let's give some other examples. Mass Effect 1 has really on-theme characters, and I think this was on accident, but maybe it was on purpose. And the real difference between Mass Effect and Star Trek is that Mass Effect has a bunch of themes running in parallel. It's basically got all of the sci-fi themes that they could think of. They just threw them all in there, all the 60s and 70s sci-fi themes. And they got a character attached to each one. And each characters are responsible for explaining what's going on and making it interesting. And they do. Every single one of these characters has stuff to say in the universe because the universe is just these themes all tied together, right? Now, that does suffer a little bit because they don't interact with each other very well because they're not part of the same theme. We can write a Star Trek plot where it's just character development, where it's just like Data is asking Riker what it means to bluff in poker. That's easy because they're both part of the same core theme of what it means to be human. They're just approaching it from different angles. But these characters aren't all part of the same theme. We've got one that's, what does it mean to be Paragon versus Renegade? We've got another one that's, what does it mean to be racist? We've got another one that's, whatever. And because they all have things to say about the universe, they have a lot to say out in the world, but they don't really have a lot to say to each other. And you see that pretty clearly in Mass Effect 1. They don't really hang out very much. Now, this falls apart in the later Mass Effects. Mass Effect 3 is particularly bad, which is why I think it was probably on accident, because if they understood what they were doing in Mass Effect 1, they probably wouldn't have undermined it so aggressively in Mass Effect 3. So, as an example, in Mass Effect 3, there is a character that exists to explore the Paragon side. Just like the Turian in the first game exists to explore the Renegade side, we've got a character that explores the Paragon side, and that would be the Justicar. So, she is taking responsibility. She's hunting down her own daughters, even though it pains her. She follows a very, very aggressive code of conduct, and she's dressed like S&M Barbie with a bustier and thigh-high boots. So she's hunting down her daughters while dressed as an S&M queen. That's kind of awkward. Yeah. So, although her theme is supposed to be what does it mean to be Paragon? What does it mean to never, ever go the easy route? Her actual elements, her actual character design and the things she says and the ways she says them very rarely backs that up. She normally just talks about her honor. And somewhere along the line, they forgot that she was supposed to be part of the universe. So she's only really part of like the 4 events that involve her daughters. And the rest of the time, she doesn't really have anything to say or do. And that's a real shame because the world does have a lot of paragonity to it. And she could have had a lot of things to say about that if they had written her that way. Instead, they decided that it was more important to have her look sexy. Apparently, they thought the only way that they could make a mom look sexy was to dress her up as an S&M queen, so that's what they did. And it totally derailed her character. To the point where they didn't even bother trying to make her do the things that she was obviously designed to do, and it really, really infuriates me. Maybe you have a different take on Samara. Maybe you think she was fine. I don't know. But either way, this is an example of when the themes don't end up working. She could have had a lot to say. She could have been written into every single thing that happens in the game world because every single thing that happens in the game world is already related to Paragon versus Renegade. And she is Paragon, so she could come in and say something. She very rarely does. It's a shame. It's a shame, and you don't have to do that. You can do it right. You can go in and you can write your characters to work out. You can have your characters actually have things to say about the stories. And now I think a big part of this in Mass Effect 3 was simply that they have 20 or 30 party members and then another dozen or so that you can buy for $9.95. And that definitely makes it difficult just because of the sheer number of people, characters involved. But Star Trek only had 3 or 4 main characters, and the rest were all just random background characters. And it ran great for a long time. That's the power of making sure that your themes work. You're not always going to be focused on your core 3 or 4 characters, but those core 3 or 4 characters can always be there, and they can always have something interesting to say, and they can always pull your ass out of the fire. And those are your party members. It's that simple. It's also worth noting that the design of the character has to back up their theme. For example, Data, this is Data, has gray skin, as you can see, and he has gray eyes, or yellow eyes, as you can see, and those are there specifically to make him look inhuman, or less human. They're there to make him look flat and robotic, because that's what he is. He's a robot for the reason that they wanted to make him want to be human, and the easiest way to do that was to make him something that couldn't be human. And aliens are all representatives of being human, so he has to be a robot. He can't use contractions because that's a fun thing to do, and he can say something like, well, contractions are sloppy human thinking, and so you can explain it that way. All of the characters have something to them. All of their design elements reflect their theme. So not only do they integrate with the world by talking about their theme in ways which work, they are also designed with their themes in mind. And when they can grow in ways that help reflect their themes. Like Riker can grow a beard, right? How does that help? Well, a beard is fundamentally something that isn't required or necessary in space. It's a sign that he is a human first and a space lieutenant second. This is all stuff that sort of happens naturally once you get used to thinking about what these characters are about. At least that's my theory. Let me know what you think.